Good morning. Welcome to this morning's speaker series at the East Bay EDA about biomedical manufacturing and public health. I'm Stephen Bader, the Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, or as we call ourselves, East Bay EDA. We're a 30-year-old regional economic development organization focused on a variety of different issues, from business climate to transportation and land use and housing to quality of life and other issues. And we're really excited this morning about our about today's event, where we have a great panel of East Bay manufacturing companies put together to talk about the nexus between biomedical manufacturing and public health. Here this morning to moderate today's panel is Nicholas Moss, the Public Health Officer for Alameda County, who was appointed to that position in November 2020. He served as a team leader in Alameda County's COVID-19 response since the beginning of last year, and is an infectious disease specialist and medical epidemiologist by training. He brings extensive knowledge in communicable disease and experience in leadership roles, originally joining the Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency as the Public Health HIV STD Section Director. Dr. Moss, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank the East Bay Economic Development Alliance for its work and for hosting this discussion about biomedical manufacturing and public health. Thanks to Stephen, Allison, and Jackie at East Bay EDA for inviting me to moderate today. So it's been a tough year full of many twists and turns. And in Alameda County, we're now fortunate to be on the tail end of our COVID-19 winter surge and already into our vaccine campaign, but many challenges still lie ahead. And one of the greatest challenges of the past year has been the sense that we must choose between public health and economic health. Shutdowns work from a public health standpoint, but they cause undoubted economic costs. And these are not borne evenly, but disproportionately by some industries and not others. This is not unlike the disparities that we've observed with the COVID epidemic itself. There have definitely been winners and losers, and the long-term effects remain to be determined. At the same time, there are costs to rampant disease spread, illness, fear, and death. And there are, of course, always things that we in government can do to better support businesses and workers to weather storms like this. But to reduce the pandemic to a choice between economic stability and public health is, I think, a mistake. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion, because I think it will reveal at least part of a different narrative, which is that of one where businesses can adapt and even thrive, and where employees can work and grow, and where public health can support industry to keep workforces healthy. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to hear from some of our East Bay business leaders in the biomedical manufacturing space about their company's experiences during the pandemic and what they see for the coming year. So with that, I'll introduce our panel. Noreen King is an expert in the field of manufacturing technology. As the CEO and founder of Evolve Manufacturing, her experience in both materials management and production sides of manufacturing allows her to take on the most challenging jobs for customers, who range from pre-FDA approval VC-funded startups to establish $5 billion businesses. Noreen dedicates herself to continual learning, whether it's state-of-the-art manufacturing processes or simply learning about her customers. Teresa Thuruthiyil leverages executive experience, a collaborative style, and strong interpersonal skills and instincts to help consumer and technology companies differentiate themselves in global marketplaces. She currently serves as Chief Strategy Officer at the Fremont, California-based PrinterPrezz, where the team brings together polymer and metal 3D printing, nanotechnologies, and surgical expertise to design and produce next-generation additively manufactured medical devices. And Lynn Vera is an industry executive with years of experience aligning human resources with companies' business goals. Her experiences include manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, high tech, and entertainment. Lynn currently works for Mettler-Toledo Rainin, a global manufacturing organization, where she is responsible for recruiting and community outreach. And Lynn also gives back to her community through work with a variety of local nonprofit organizations and associations. So with that, we're going to start our discussion on the topic of the economy, including new business, products, and markets. And the way this works is that I will ask questions and we'll have each of the panelists comment on those questions. So the first one, and I'm going to ask Noreen to start, please introduce us to your respective companies, the products you manufacture, and where you operate. How have your companies pivoted to new product development or new markets in response to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Hi, I'm Noreen King. My company is Evolve Manufacturing Technologies. I founded it 20 years ago, and I am located here this morning. This is my production floor, and these are samples of some of the products that we manufacture here, mostly medical and biotech equipment, oftentimes very large capital equipment such as ultrasound machines and parts of MRI machines and stuff like that. And now lately, because of COVID, we've had to pivot. Starting in March, we began to build test kits for COVID, and that ran into the millions of kits. So it was very different for our company because normally we built stuff that took about a week to build, and now we were doing things that took 30 seconds. So it was quite exciting for my team to be able to work on lean manufacturing. And it's always been our dream here at Evolve to do high volume medical equipment for the US markets. And I think COVID is, having people consider doing that now. So I think in some ways there's good and bad, So that's about what.
Thank you. And next, let's hear from Teresa.
Great, thanks, Nick. So PrinterPrezz is a 3-year young company here in the Warm Springs Innovation District in Fremont. We were formed to apply additive technologies specifically to the medical device industry. So in a nutshell, we do 3D printing, everything from polymer-based materials to titanium-based spine implants. And it's focused specifically on that. We have an ISO 13485 certified facility here in Fremont in the Innovation District, and we have been in the business of really focused on orthopedics and spine implants. That was until around this time last year. So last year, when it became apparent that the COVID-19 flu was more than a localized flu, that it was it would become a global pandemic, and we were just starting to realize that. Our business was interrupted right away. As many of you know, supply chain stopped, customers stopped, everything sort of turned over a weekend, and people stopped doing business and were trying to figure out how to safely go back to doing business. In that time, PrinterPrezz faced an additional challenge in that we started to get inquiries from the local hospital systems, and as such pivoted to help support their needs during a time when they couldn't get critical supplies because supply chains were shut down, and we started doing very specialized PPE for those groups. In that time, we have gone back to our main focus, which is the additive manufacturing technologies. But we did have some time in between where we were able to help the local hospital systems get the critical PPE that they needed.
Thank you. Lynn? I think you're muted, Lynn.
There we go. I'm Lynn Vera. I'm from Mettler-Toledo, Rainin. We are also a biotech manufacturing company. We manufacture pipettes and pipette tips in Oakland, California. Our manufacturing is done locally. In terms of having to shift and pivot, we too started producing PPE last year. We started producing face shields for the state of California, a few other states. We were very happily able to donate 10,000 face shields to the city of Oakland for local use. But we stopped producing that as face shields became more available. Much of our pivoting is not so much of developing new products, but keeping up with demand. There's a global shortage for our product, and all of the companies you're hearing about in the news the FDA or companies and organizations, the FDA, the CDC, National Institute for Health, Pfizer, Regeneron, J&J, they're all customers of ours. And the pandemic has created a large increase in the demand for our product. We had to up our production from the consumable product we make. We were manufacturing 7.5 to 9 million pipette tips a day. We've now upped it to 10, and we are working on increasing our production footprint so that we're adding more jobs and more equipment to our facility to be able to up production even more.
Thank you. So I think a few themes jumped out for me, which is, that actually that there were opportunities that arose in some ways for your companies, but also not just sort of initial pivots, but maybe multiple pivots as demands for things related to the pandemic emerged and then maybe reduced again. And so, I think along those lines, and we heard supply chain mentioned, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about how, with the return to manufacturing both locally and globally, what are supply chain gaps like now, and does that present or perhaps prevent opportunities for local growth and opportunities here in early 2021? And I'll turn this over to Teresa to get us started.
Sure. I don't know that we are seeing major supply chain gaps now. A lot of that has normalized, which has made it easier for all of our communities, really across the country, to get what we needed. For us, the lesson that came out of that sudden halt in supply chain and functioning really gave us the opportunity to pressure test the whole model behind 3D printing and the whole model behind disparate manufacturing and distributed manufacturing. So now you could have something that was designed in one region, a file sent to another region, production happening locally and getting quickly distributed to communities, which is essentially what we did here, right? We were not in the business of PPE at all, but there were certain specialized components needed for respirators and other things that hospitals in our community literally reached out to us saying, hey, we know you have a facility that's certified, we know you have control processes, can you help us to do these things? And it gave us an opportunity to do that. Now, we could not have done that by ourselves. So there were people there, we worked very closely with universities who were advancing research to get certain design files together. They can do that. They've been working on that. That's their specialty. They don't have the manufacturing function. So for that, they needed to send the file over to us. We would have it printed. We would move prototypes and things very quickly through to help development, as well as production and manufacturing move faster. And I think that this model of distributed manufacturing is going to be interesting. It's going to be impactful for local groups. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the East Bay and for Fremont to step up here. I think that shareholders and business owners, all kinds of people are going to be asking about your supplier relationships, and sole source is not going to be an answer anymore. So the more flexible your system, the more opportunity there will be for all of us.
Thank you. And Lynn, what about at Rainin? How would you characterize where supply chain is today and what you see for the coming year?
I'm going to second much of what Teresa said. Supply chain has pretty much normalized for us. It pressure tested our whole system and showed us where the gaps were. A lot of our supply chain support and planning, a California company or our California division, we thought through, what if there's an earthquake and certain products can't get through from a supply chain. We had not thought about a global pandemic before. And so, working on multiple sources, considering where all the component parts come from, considering where the raw materials come from, even though we manufacture locally, we're very connected to other businesses elsewhere, and coming up with plans that include what we haven't considered yet is really where we're thinking. And I think all companies must be going through this right now.
Noreen, do you want to chime in on this current supply chain and thoughts for 2021?
Yeah, I think the supply chain has normalized, but it's not enough for us to do manufacturing locally. We do need to replace some of these things that we get supplied from China and Taiwan and places like that. That's still risky. And so we do think that there should be a local suppliers for the components that we need, particularly the custom components. So for us to be able to shorten the supply chain between the demand of the customer and production, then we need to have local guys manufacturing our sheet metal and stuff like that. So this is what we're trying to develop. And so we really appreciate any support the East Bay can give us to help encourage people to manufacture closer to home.
Thank you. And before we move on to the next topic, which is going to be more on workforce and community focused, I am interested, because some of you have hinted at this, at sort of long-term shifts to your either your business or the broader industry that you operate in, driven by COVID. Is this when we look back a few years, is this going to be we learned a lot of lessons, we adapted, we took advantage of some opportunities, and now we're back to our core? Or is this really going to result in long-term changes in your strategy? And maybe Noreen, if you want to take first crack at that.
Yeah, I think we feel encouraged that we can do high volume manufacturing of complex medical equipment here, which was foolishly done overseas sometimes, in my opinion, because oftentimes the components that make up like a product like this, the components are 80% of the cost and the labor is like 10%. And so I know it's wonderful to have a $2 an hour labor rate, but it's not a significant savings if you were to manufacture efficiently. I feel like we abandoned the manufacturing technologies like 25 years ago, and we've not made much progress. So. Thank you.
Teresa, what about from your standpoint, long-term shifts in your sector or business from this?
I think it speaks very specifically to the benefits of 3D printing. It is set up to be that kind of a distributed manufacturing system. But I wholeheartedly agree with Noreen that it's very much dependent. The innovation labs we have specifically here in Fremont are very much dependent on local partners to get things done. That's how things move quickly, and that really is at the core of our business. We do 3D printing in lots of different materials. We do, everything from surgical equipment to actual implants that go into the body. But the key to all of that is that development process and how quickly you can move through that. And that requires having specialized partners here. In the East Bay in particular, we're lucky. We have an amazing staff of people around us. We have highly educated workforce. We have a flexible workforce surrounding us. We have world-class universities. We have research facilities. We have hospitals. Again, world-class facilities that can all come together to create the kind of momentum that we need to speed experimentation and therefore production.
Well, I think, it's interesting that you bring that up, and this is maybe a sensitive topic, but, we hear a lot in the news about companies leaving California or leaving the Bay Area for, and the sort of tension between all that the Bay Area has to offer and of course, certainly the East Bay in terms of expertise and capacity versus, the business environment. And it seems that aspects of the pandemic have sort of put additional pressure on this dynamic where oh, this company is going to move to Texas or that company. But I'm also hearing you say that there's, a very rich environment here that you can all draw upon. And I wonder if that, does that seem overblown? Is that a press story? And does, I think the Bay Area, from my perspective, is not as a business person, still has a huge amount to offer for industry and for biomedical. But I'd be interested to hear your perspective as you're talking about, regional partnerships and things like that. Are people leaving? And is that a challenge?
I think people are leaving. I mean, of course, but I think there's this concept of, I think what, I'm not sure if Teresa, if you do this, but my thinking is we have a lot of very wealthy people in this area with a lot of money to spend. And the closer your production is to the supply chain in medical, for example, the better, because you can react quickly. And for example, I don't know if you guys do custom implants, I would imagine that's a growth area where before you have a choice of 3 knees and now you can have the knee size that you need, for example.
Large.
Right. And so for that type of industry, I think that has to be somewhere like this, right? Where you can do the scan and then make the part and then sterilize it and put it in on Friday,
You bring together top-notch hospitals, top-notch talent, top-notch technology, and tested processes and facilities. Make that a reality.
So that sort of stuff has to happen here, I think. So
I would agree that people are leaving. The way that it impacts us is that we're hiring those people from the companies that are moving to Texas and elsewhere. So that it's, I don't know how many individuals are leaving. And I probably wouldn't know or notice unless I knew the person individually that a person is taking a job in Texas because their company is moving to Texas. But we're hiring those people if their companies leave them.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, because it is actually a segue to our next topic. And so the next question is, biomedical manufacturing is one of the bright spots in the employment market. While recovering from its peak, the unemployment rate in the East Bay is still very high and labor market participation low, particularly for people of color, women, and young people. Are you currently hiring, and what occupations and skills are in greatest demand? And Lynn, I'm actually going to start with you again, since you started delving into this area. Do you want to comment?
Sure. Yes, we're hiring quite a bit. We hired 140 people last year, right through COVID. We've hired 14 people so far this month. I have almost 80 open positions, and 2/3 of them are not replacement for people who have left. They're actually additions to our staff. And as we increase production, that's just going to increase. We'll grow by 100, 150 people this year, maybe. In terms of positions, we have a huge range of positions, everything from entry level, no previous skills required, through to warehouse technicians, engineers. We're looking for a bilingual human resources manager. If you know of anyone, send them our way. And so there's a lot of growth and opportunity.
Thank you. Teresa, how about?
Sure, I can address that from the small company perspective, right? PrinterPrezz is a small business growing. We have 3 facilities actually on site here in Fremont, but we also are very mindful of the fact that we need to keep our people separated and physically distanced in those spaces. And so we have really put those spaces to work. We are hiring as well. Ours tends to be much more specialized. We are looking for people with additive manufacturing backgrounds, but we are also looking for technicians in the labs. We're looking for production planners. As for the first time last year, we started running shifts that are broader than a traditional 9 to 5, simply because we needed to have fewer people on site, and we needed to have them here continuing to produce things throughout the week. And so that means that we need more people in that effort as well.
Noreen,
Yeah, we're definitely hiring at the entry level for our test kit production. And it's a great opportunity for people because once we have them in-house, we observe their skills and their personality and everything. And we've taken from that pool and elevated a lot of people out of that pool of workers. So I think it's very good for people who are underserved. And also with regards to women, I feel like that manufacturing is a career that women are well suited to and often don't think of. They say unless they're from a manufacturing father's and mother's family, they don't know about manufacturing. And I would encourage anybody who would like an exciting career, as someone whose dad was in manufacturing, I think it's a great career for women. So, and then also we have a great communication with the local community colleges, and we've hired a lot of really excellent interns with the help of Fremont, you know, so yeah.
In terms of workforce, what's the thing that, where's the gap? What's the thing that you wish you could access better, or the problem that you want to solve in terms of workforce locally? Is anything like that?
For us?
Yeah, sure. Noreen, yeah, why don't you
yeah,
start?
not really, because we like to, at Evolve, we kind of operate quite differently than everybody else. So we try to bring them into our own ecosystem and train them.
Yeah.
So we haven't really had too many problems.
Lynn, what about on your end? Are there things that that you can't find locally, or that or other ways that you need to support workforce development locally for your business?
Yes, absolutely. I do want to add something off of what Noreen was saying. I think that many people think manufacturing is a male-oriented world, but if you look at who's on this panel right now, I think it shows that manufacturing is not all male. Slightly more than half of our population of hundreds of people are female, and we're in Oakland, and our employee population looks like the city of Oakland. It's very, very diverse. In terms of skills gaps, the biggest gap that we see on an ongoing basis is in a technician level role. So it's not the entry level, it's not the engineering types or the experienced supply chain planner people. We have a pretty good pool of that. It's the technician level. There used to be more vocational training in the Bay Area, and that kind of left many years ago, and there's not a good replacement. We do, like Noreen, we work with local schools that do some of that, but there's a big gap in terms of automation is increasing, and we don't have enough automation technicians. We use molding technicians, quality technicians, manufacturing technicians, engineering technicians. They're, between entry level and highly skilled professionals. That's where we have our biggest gap.
Thank you. I have lots of follow-up questions, but I also want to just keep us moving along. We have some other topics to get to, and we want to get to Q&A. So I'm going to move to the next question, and Teresa, I'll start with you, and then we'll ask for everyone's input. So what are the ways your business has adapted the manufacturing environment to COVID-19 in terms of workplace safety and health? And I know you hinted at this before, Teresa, but
I did. I talked a little bit about it. Certainly having multiple work sites has been very useful for us. So we did immediately start to say that people working on a certain site didn't need to be at the other sites. We contained everybody in terms of where they were, just down to the nitty gritty. Remember, this all sort of happened very quickly, and we were needing to figure out new forums for places for people to have lunch, for places, for which restrooms were they use, for which areas they go into and out of, accessibility points, even with 3 sites, who was coming in through which doors, and again, with the idea of limiting contact as much as possible. Where that has been particularly a challenge for us is that as a small company, we felt the impact of that to our culture. There was a time when a customer issue or a learning opportunity or even just an announcement about an exciting new $1 million printer that was coming in through the back door would reach everybody just from the sound of my voice. And that's not the case anymore. And we really needed to think about what it takes to to maintain culture, to maintain connections, to maintain opportunities for learning and sharing, particularly in a small business environment.
Yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see how that would be a big disruption. How long did it take to sort of adapt? And I know I know that public health guidelines have changed many times over the course of the pandemic, and you know, and I'm sorry that it has been so unpredictable. But you know, do you have a sense of how long it took to sort of get the basic you know, safety procedures and changes in place?
It is an ongoing process, absolutely. So as the guidelines evolve, as our learning evolves, right? So much of this, it meant weeding through a lot of misinformation at the beginning, and that really was the biggest job, particularly for anybody in a leadership role at these businesses, because you know, you suddenly, I'm not a medical doctor, but suddenly I was being asked all kinds of questions like, you know, and you know, if can I drive down to San Diego to see my girlfriend this weekend? Can I still report to work on Monday? You know, I'm still figuring those things out, and we have processes and protocols in place. But to answer your question specifically, it probably took us a good month at least to make sure we had some basic protocols in place, that we had enough in terms of supplies. You know, there's a cleaning protocol that goes through here a couple of times a day. There's, you know, and early on it was hard to get hand sanitizer and cleaning materials and other kinds of things. That took some time. Since then, we've put up plexiglass barriers. We've put up, you know, we've figured out masking protocol. Air purifiers help a lot. But that transition certainly was, it was timely, it was important, it was stressful.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this question over to Lynn in one moment, because I know there's also a lot to be shared from the experience at Mettler-Toledo Rainin. But I think it's funny that you comment, Teresa, on people, you know, asking you sort of medical safety questions, because I'm in sort of the opposite boat, which is businesses. You know, I'm not a business person. I don't have experience in any of the many sectors that we are working with, and so I get the opposite question, which is, how can my business run in this environment? And so that just speaks to the fact that, and what we've tried to do here locally is really connect with organizations like East Bay, EDA, and other industry groups, because of course you are all the experts at what this means on the ground. And sometimes we're making recommendations in public health that are certainly, we're trying to make everything data and evidence driven, but there are just the practical realities on the ground. And so we are trying, and we continue to try to connect with the business community to understand how we can do all this stuff better. So I laughed when you said that, because I've so frequently had the opposite experience. So Lynn, how about from your perspective, can you comment on adaptations of the environment for COVID for workplace health and safety?
So much of what we did is the same thing that Teresa did in her company. Anybody who could do their job from home was sent home actually before the shelter in place. We were just briefly ahead of the bigger shelter in place order, and people are still at home if they can be at home. For the people there, we did, so how long it took, we did some things within a day or two. We rolled out Teams, Microsoft Teams, as a communication tool. As we were sending people home, we knew they needed a communication team. Some things happened very quickly. Also, right in the beginning, we established a team with a representative from each area of the company who met daily to start working through the problems. And much of the big movements happened within a couple of weeks. Some things had to be built. Some, protocols had to be put in place, but we're still learning and going through it as well as the numbers change, as the environment changes. We're doing different reporting now in terms of tracking people who are out and making sure that they're out, that they're quarantined, and communicating with our employees. We recently, just a few weeks ago, instituted what we call COVID warriors. We realized that people weren't necessarily trying to break protocols, but you get busy in your job and maybe you forget protocols. We have somebody assigned on each shift that is identified as a COVID warrior. They got extra training on all of the protocols and are, identified as the person to help remind you, hey, your mask is slipping off your nose there. The proper way to wear the mask is over your nose and your chin. Hey, you're standing a little bit close. You really want to keep that distance. Just reminding people of all of the protocols. So even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, even though we are constantly on this, we're still making changes.
Thank you. Noreen, how about it evolve?
Same thing. The first weekend we just put tarps in between all the different areas, and we created 6 zones, and everyone got a kitchen and a bathroom that they can go to, and they are not allowed to meet people from other zones. And like everyone says, it's not right away, because then we found out guys in the same 2 different zones were living together, like families, because we were hiring like 100 people, and so like, oh, what are you doing? Carpooling together. Oh, great, yeah. So, this kind of stuff that you just learn on the fly. But I have a friend over at Owens Design over here, Bob Fung is the CEO, and he gave me the idea of putting carbon dioxide monitors in the smaller rooms so that you can make sure that the air is fresh enough with all these filters and stuff. So other than that, we all kind of are probably facing the same stuff.
Don't get me started on carpools. I think what I'm interested in, and this might get into a pretty big topic, but how can public health play a bigger part in ensuring manufacturing resilience and workplace health and safety, particularly in the biomedical manufacturing sector? And of course, I'm interested to hear from you all what your thoughts about how vaccine plays into this. And Noreen, maybe why don't we just start back with you?
Well, as far as vaccines, I mean, there's not much we can do about it, right? I mean, hopefully we can vaccinate people, because people are doing a service to come here and put themselves at risk and put their families at risk. We've had 2 of our team members' parents died in nursing homes, and they couldn't, one of COVID, and either one of them couldn't see them. But getting off of that, so, what was the other question you were saying about?
Oh, just more broadly, how public health can support.
Oh, I do think on testing, if, I don't know if it's true or not, but we were told that we may have to be testing people, and that they wanted the companies to pay for that. And I think that would be a really tough burden. Like for us to do testing, it costs about $10,000 to test our team. So $40,000 a month would be very, very difficult for a manufacturing company. And I imagine some companies could afford it and others couldn't. And so I do think if it was mandatory, then I think that it should be sort of supported by the state, in my opinion. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'll save my comments about vaccine, but in terms of testing, yeah, I mean, we do, the OSHA now does require employers to provide some support around testing that's relatively new. I think it's good feedback, because we do like to test when there are cases in a work site where things might have spread, but understood this can be a real challenge for a lot of businesses.
Right.
Teresa, how about from your perspective, ways public health can better support the business and particularly, in the sector more broadly, and again, your thoughts on how vaccine can support?
Sure. I would point to 2 things, actually. So first of all, I think it's important that public health has a process or a way to stay on top of the manufacturing capabilities in their respective regions. I think that's important, because when something like this happens, you need to know who's around you and what they can do. And that's very particular to our business, but I think it goes beyond our business as well, because there is a lot of specialized skill sets, a lot of specialized technologies, again, a lot of flexible manufacturing and flexible workforce that can do something different than maybe what they were originally doing. And if you needed them to step up during a time of crisis, public health teams need to know who those people are and what they can do. So that's one. The other one for me is also kind of close to my heart, and that's really, it's about data and education. I think that there's a lot of opportunity without violating anybody's civil liberties. I think there's a lot of opportunity to share data that public health officials have. So it's helpful for, if I have a lot of people who work in a particular area in Fremont or in Milpitas or wherever, in whatever zip code, if public health starts to see an issue with a flu in a certain region or MMR, in another region, mumps is suddenly becoming an issue somewhere, the more we know about those kinds of things, the less I'm finding out about issues that are happening from social media or on the news and hearing it directly from within our communities, the more we're able to be ahead of the curve and help combat those issues.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. And I agree. And I think, communication is sort of one of probably the most important public health functions that a public health department can have, and in a particular department like ours, which we don't, unlike some of our neighbor jurisdictions, we don't operate our own health system. And so, one of our main functions is really to tell people what's going on and help them understand and protect themselves. And I agree, we could do a better job at that. We've gotten better, I would say, over the course of the pandemic. And then some of the challenges around sharing data is some of that's just capacity. We've tried to on the fly, but the demands have been huge, built the capacity to do the kind of sharing that we would like and people want, but I'm hoping for continued improvements. And some of it has been just a bit of a regulatory challenge for us, but I think I'm hopeful that people will begin to see more and more over time. And I'm just sorry that we don't move as fast as people have their expectations. And then I think your comment about just being plugged into the local industries is very important. And of course, a lot of people reached out to us at the start of COVID, and we have been able to engage with business, both locally, and then there's kind of national organizations that moved into the testing business and things like that. But we're very careful about our partnerships, and we really look local first. And I know our board is supportive of that, and so but I appreciate just the importance of being plugged into the landscape. Lynn, very quickly, your comments on how public health can better support resilience and safety in the workplace and on vaccine.
Yeah, for me, I'll be brief. I echo the comments of both Noreen and Teresa and Nick, you too. For me, it's all about vaccines and communication. Getting us the vaccines quickly. Nick, our business, like other businesses, when they're accessible and it's our turn, we'll vaccinate our own employees. We'll provide the people to do it if we can get the vaccines. But the other big part is communication. The kinds of communication you've already spoken about, and there's one piece that we're already thinking about that hasn't been mentioned, and that is how we come out of this. There will be people who won't get vaccinated or who can't get vaccinated. How do we keep them and the rest of our employees safe? What are the sort of the best practices for keeping our population safe, and how to transition, because we know not everybody's going to get a vaccine at once, and how we make it through the transition. And after everybody who can get vaccinated or wants to get vaccinated is, what then? COVID may not be completely gone just when we get to that point. So just communication around best practices and keeping us healthy.
Thank you. That's very valuable feedback. And we're going to turn it over to Q&A. And before we do that, I'll just say some big vaccine messages. We're glad on the public health side at how much demand there is, both just from our residents, but also from industries who want to make sure that their workplaces are safe, and so that they can get beyond disruptive quarantine and safety procedures. And I will urge everybody to have patience. It's going far slower than any of us would like. And even as people start to get vaccinated, we are asking people to really stick with the things that we know have worked, limit the spread, particularly here in the East Bay. I think we've done a pretty good job. The face coverings, the distancing, and the procedures you put in place to protect your workforce, and hang in there as we get more vaccine and more infrastructure built around vaccine delivery. And so I think it's time to open up the floor to questions. Let's see. So Stephen, I think you were going to.
Yeah, we have a question here, Dr. Moss. One of them, and for you to consider to the panel, about the challenges that test kit manufacturers face with sourcing supplies of biological components such as antigens, antibodies, and enzymes.
Well, I think that's a great question for Noreen to take a crack at.
Sure. Initially, it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. I mean, I can't even explain how bad, but that seems to have, it seems to be not a problem for us right now. We have, a long-term supply agreement with somebody, and it's working fine. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, from the public health standpoint, was a big challenge in terms of testing just availability. And as we move on, just a reminder to the panelists: if you want to jump in on a specific question, you can put your hand up, and I will open the floor to you as well. Stephen, what's the next question?
Yeah, we have a few questions, actually a lot of comments about the employment, and a little bit of a few sort of different programs and other things referenced. But there's a question that one of our attendees asked about current job openings with companies and their pay scale, and if they pay at a sufficient level to meet the cost of living in our region. I know it's a perennial question.
Maybe I'll turn this over to Lynn. And Lynn, I'll just ask you to comment in broad terms about making it work with the high cost of living and housing here in the Bay Area. Sure,
that's a perennial problem in the Bay Area. I know for all jobs, and because many of our jobs pay very well, including those technician level roles. We do have positions that are much lower paying, and particularly the entry level ones. We do a couple of things, and we're not in a position to, pay $80,000 a year for somebody entry level. But we've addressed that in a couple of ways internally. One, we promote from within, so that if you start in an entry level job, hopefully you're not staying in an entry level job. We are in the process of creating an apprenticeship program to train some of our entry level people to move into that technician level role. And those technician level roles are more than just surviving wage jobs. They're thriving wage jobs. We also have another internal training program called Career Acceleration Program to give people who might have the opportunity to work move into higher level professional roles, skills, organizational skills, presentation skills, time management skills, those kinds of skills. So we've tried to create programs within our organization that facilitate people moving out of the entry level roles up in to higher paid roles. But we do have some that I do think it's very difficult to survive as a new employee in one of the more entry level roles if you're not filling a professional level position.
Thanks, and I'll just comment that from the public health standpoint, it sometimes doesn't seem like this, but economic opportunity is closely linked with health, and we are deeply interested in economic opportunities. But of course, locally the cost of living is it's not just about supporting those jobs, but how people can make it work with the jobs that are available and the wages that are available. So it's definitely a health issue. Stephen, what's the next question that we have?
Yeah, I think we want to sort of have a broader, there's a few other comments from some folks in the audience who are interested in contacting some of you, and East Bay DA is happy to be the go-between for that. But so we just want to appreciate the suggestions and questions out there. There is a question that's actually just come in about the way in which companies were able to speed the acceptance process. I'm not sure exactly if that means maybe the work site plan with the county, and this person is tied to a company that's been having, I think, some challenges around getting vaccine solutions deployed. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on their sort of maybe also tied to that, maybe their practices on the floor.
And I'm not sure I totally followed that question. So if one of the panelists has an answer, please raise your hand. But could you just repeat the question for me, Stephen? Make sure.
Sure. Yeah. So the questions, I'll read it verbatim. It's how were you able to speed the acceptance process with Alameda County? I'm also a medical device manufacturer and have had difficulty for my company's COVID and vaccine solutions to be deployed.
Does it mean he has a product?
Yeah, not clear.
Like
My take on it might be around the operations and sort of side, but it's maybe around how to get restarted around workplace safety because of a work.
Sure. I mean, we don't. We are not at the county public health department is not approving plans in terms of operations. You need to have one. But in terms of general operations, we don't read all those plans and say yes or no, you can operate. So I'm not sure if that's what the question was getting at. And then maybe if you want to, Noreen, comment on sort of any regular, pivoting to managing the regulatory environment, maybe around test kits or new products, maybe that would be helpful.
Well, I guess we've already been 1345 and FDA registered, so there isn't really any change to our operating processes. So
maybe you could also help by addressing the issue, because I think a big issue for a lot of companies as they bring people back to on-site and as they expand their on-site work is to understand what's available to them around testing. Like I know that, for us, getting more rapid tests would help a lot, because if I have an issue here in the lab where somebody is ill, I have to quarantine that person and anyone who's been around that person until I get some test results. And so maybe you could address that for us about testing and vaccines again.
Sure. Okay. So in terms of testing, we lean heavily on the broader medical community, and also to the extent that employers can't support testing, we really do look to that at situations where there are exposures in the workplace. And again, there is statewide regulation about this, but we understand that can be a challenge. There are testing sites that we operate across the county, or that we partner with cities and others to operate across the county. And those certainly are an option. Nobody gets turned away. But in terms of supporting individual businesses and bringing testing into those sites, there are a huge number of businesses and limited capacity of the public health department to dive in there. But I appreciate hearing that we need better solutions for you. I will also say, if there's a case and there are exposed employees, those people need to go home. And except there's a little bit of nuance to this, but in general, even with testing, you have to stay home for the whole time after you've been exposed. I see heads nodding here. Absolutely. And then in terms of vaccine, I'm going to be very clear about this. It's changed recently. Occupation-based vaccine prioritization now, according to the state of California, big announcement yesterday, governor's new strategy, is really going to be limited to the education and childcare sector, emergency services, and food and agriculture. So other manufacturing industries are no longer their own separate prioritized group. Instead, the state is really going to look at age-based prioritization. The motivation for age-based is that our greatest burden of severe disease and death is far and away for older adults. But that does mean it's a bit of again, I mentioned this, it's a big curveball for all of us to try to adapt. And so I think the time frame for vaccine on an industry by industry level is going to be quite different from what we were expecting. And I think we're going to need to continue to focus on those other safety measures for the time being.
So I think we probably are just getting down to maybe one last question. I know that Mayor May of Fremont was very excited to see our panel here of all women today, and has a question about things that cities and other entities can do, like East Bay DA and workforce intermediaries, community colleges, to advocate with local public health to expand internships in a pipeline.
Well, I think from a public health standpoint, a huge role of these partnerships. I mentioned it before. Let's start with Teresa. Comments about the pipeline and partnerships with things like East Bay EDA for workforce.
Sure. Education has always been an important part of what we do at PrinterPrezz. 3D printing and additive technologies rely on bringing people in with different skill sets, and that the diversity that comes from that leads to better applications and better processes. So it's important to us. We're bringing new technologies to age-old industries in some regards. And that starts at a very early level. So we support ROP in high schools, all the way through to working with the community colleges, all the way to working with PhD programs to bring the best talent together and again to create that workforce that we're going to need as we grow.
Thank you. Lynn, from your perspective?
We do have a pretty robust summer internship program most years. We canceled it last year, and I'm afraid we're not going to have it this year. But as far as our company is concerned, if you're an organization that wants to work with us on interns, whether it's co-op programs that might happen during the year or summer internships, reach out. I think establishing that company connection is the best way of having that be developed.
Noreen, briefly from you?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of interns, and we feel responsible to give them, excellent experience when they work for us. We don't make them sweep the floor or anything. So it is very good, but we don't have that many. So we do get a little overwhelmed with how many we have, but definitely we encourage everyone to apply.
Thank you. Well, we're at the very end here. I just wanted to highlight again, Mayor May from Fremont inviting participation and contact with her economic development team. And I'm sure other mayors and people from across the county would feel the same. And so I just wanted to express my gratitude for being here and being able to moderate this conversation and people's honest and frank answers about their experience with their businesses during this pandemic, and really highlighting the important role of biomedical manufacturing here in the East Bay and how it has been able to respond as an industry during the pandemic. And so I really appreciate that participation from the panel. And I think, Stephen, it's up to you to close us out.
Great. Well, yeah, just want to reiterate our appreciation to our fantastic panel, Lynn, Noreen, Teresa, and Dr. Moss, for your excellent work in moderating today. This is a timely topic, and we know it's one that's going to be with us for a long time to come. We appreciate everybody who's joined today. We had a great group of guests as always, and we'll look forward to seeing many of you hopefully at our next event on March 2nd, where we talk about East Bay innovation. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.